haven't seen each other. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Mary Wheel and I chair this committee. This event is being streamed live on YouTube and members of the public and media are of course welcome to watch the meeting remotely. Before we proceed to the meeting, could I ask all members of the committee and the audience to make sure your mobiles are on silent or switched off? We will start with 72 seconds of silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Brentford tragedy. I've received apologies for absence from Councillor Yankson and lateness from Councillor Simples. Is that right? Yep. Does any member have any interest to declare? The minutes of the previous meeting of July 15th have been circulated. May I sign them as a correct record?
I was just asked the question, have all the actions been? There's at least one place where
I signed them as accurate.
yes, it's a great action. There's one place in particular. There was a
So the maximum actions will be included in the report. We've been in touch with colleagues in adult social care about the way to wellbeing, and they're collating that information.
Agenda, isn't it?
Yeah. So they're all being followed up. Yes.
right. I mean, there was one place where it wasn't that written in as an action also.
So I've been asked to take item 5 first. Is that agreed? The one I have to do that. This is the Savings and Transformation Act, and you have an updated supplementary paper circulated on this. So can I ask who's going to present this? Jen?
Me? Yeah.
Jen?
Will come up.
Ask it thousands.
Yeah.
No, you have to listen. Just so members are aware, I'm carrying on my pilot of not asking everybody if they want to ask a question. So when we get to that stage, please indicate to that question. I'm not really coming around one by one. Right, Jenny, please.
Thank you. So just very brief intro. So obviously members will know that we were working on the Savings Transformation Programme. Government then came along and altered the fair funding settlement, which has sort of not replaced the work that's been going on here. This is all very good work, but it certainly meant that the sort of themes that the officers have been working to and the members have been accelerated somewhat. I think quite a lot of what the report sets out is very good housekeeping. We're making sure we're managing our operational estate well. We're looking at general processes and commercialization, things that really we now have to scale up and think even more about the transformation side rather than just the saving side. I think with the fair funding review has meant that taking a small amount out of an individual service is not going to be sustainable for the long haul. We have to look at whether or not we can maintain a service in a transformed manner, and if not, what does the service cessation look like, and the savings that we'd realise from that. The paper sets out really the work to date on the money that has been able to be found through the process. I think there's still a lot more that can be done, notably on the processes side and on the operational estate. I think some big changes have happened, obviously moving 300 officers into the town hall has made a huge impact. But what that hasn't led to is a decision about what we do with other pieces of the operational estate, or now, as they are non-operational. The sort of the thinking of what comes next has to be done from this point onwards. And commercialization, we've done a lot of work in thinking about where we can find that income. Now actually putting some of those ideas into practice and generating the numbers that we hope to achieve. In fact, going a little bit beyond. We have Oracle as well to discuss tonight, but that really feeds into the processes part of the work. There's a huge amount that we can find through digital innovation, but we need those sort of infrastructure underpinning to make sure that we're able to effectively change our processes. Otherwise, we'll just be doing things in a slightly haphazard way, which we obviously don't want to be doing. So I think that's really everything from me. I don't know, Alan, you want to add in sort of?
Well, let's take some questions then. Thank you very much for that. Will.
Thank you to Alan and Joe and the team for this very interesting paper, which luckily I think I read 3 times. Because the first time took me to the overcomforting summary. The second time took me to the external June reality check. The third time reminded me of the aspiration to the best council, the objective of that via transformation within our means. So a question in 2 parts. In view of 4.22, I can point to the latest paper. The latest version of technique is circulated. Refer to these forward quickly. That's thank you to them. And then 4.22 is the page 14 is the announcement in June of what John's just referred to as the rules of it. 5.1, which is a couple of pages on. 5.1 is the fact that the consultation and will end in early 26. In other words, the decisions are going to be made by this council with regard to years paid by the 26-27 by January straight to the beginning of February through the various arms of the council and the council meeting in February. And then the fact that 5.3 that we won't hear about funding review until later on in February. So those just points in the area rather tail before head of the horse. In view of those, would you be prepared to accept a slight amendment to the paper that you put forward? First of all, 1.14, which starts off beyond 26-27, to change that before 26-27, and to be moved to point 1.1 as a strategic statement of how we implement best council and the council plan action plan. Because the most telling thing, I think, is that last clause in the summary, 1.14. And that really ought to go to the beginning, the view of the June announcement of the council. And the second part of the question is, would you also welcome OSC recommendation from this meeting for an OSC workshop with officers as soon as possible to help develop 4.42, which is about strategic direction and top shelf transformations, with a view to getting a draft paper or an outline scoping paper to the leadership team before Christmas? Would you welcome that as a recommendation?
Yes, I don't see why not. I think we're all in this together. It makes an awful lot of sense that we're sort of pulling in the same direction. Knowing where members are most keenly seeking transformative change in our services would be very sensible. Knowing where that appetite might lie. To your previous question on 1.14, I think it's probably throughout 26-27 as well. And before we are doing the work, but it's. I'm not.
The sense I'm getting to is that actually we're going to have to make some budget decisions before the leadership team proposes to council a budget in February of 26 for the budget year of 26-27. Strategic decision, maybe as an option, because we won't have the government's papers out by that time. But at least we've got to know what we do in 26-27 in the leadership stroke council decision, the council meeting, the budget meeting. But know what we're going to do then if the government goes ahead with the worst case that's been outlined by civil servants to date. Now, we may have new ministers, we may have new government by then, who knows what government breakthrough. And I think this is an excellent paper. It shows a wide range of options, but it does really give a reality check unless we've got that worked out. It's got to be worked through as a risk analysis before we get to making budget decisions.
Yes, I agree with that. But the language change you're seeking is the word informed. I'm happy to accept that.
Thank you. Joanna. Okay, page 15, you have a revised chart on 425. When you look at the pre-funding reform line, it's all really quite sort of in advance. You've got essentially 18 million and 10 million, 10 million, 9 million. When you then go to the budget gap post-reform, it's suddenly much more weighted into 29-30 as opposed to evenly balanced. Do you not, I mean, that puts an awful lot of weight on that year. Are you not anticipating things earlier, or is this because of the speed of transformation? What is it that isn't bringing or evening out that essentially the payload?
So my understanding of that one is that that's the transition arrangement that the government is willing to work to. The current thinking is that it will be front loaded, and then that there will be a sort of a 5% cut for the subsequent years. If I was speculating for the political reasons, it would simply be to move money around the country sooner rather than later, but not to speculate. But I think that's the reality. Maybe Lisa, you want to explain how they've come up with that.
I can add a little bit more, Councillor. So the first 3 years you can see in that table are the current spending and review periods, and the last year is the next spending review period. So as Councillor Jem says, that's the difference. It's around, they're looking at the first 3 years as part of the current, and then they'll look at the fourth year in the next funding review. So that's where the government is at the moment. We are hoping, and we have lobbied, and you'll see that in our response, that we want them to spread it out a little bit more evenly, because that would help us. Obviously, we don't want to bring lots forward because we don't have lots of time to do things. We'd rather they spread it over the sort of middle 2 years more. Thank you.
Yeah.
The other thing is consultation. And clearly, because of the timing of this, it's not really terribly helpful to go out to the public or indeed into select committees early in November and December. Are you planning to actually go back to the public, either in terms of a consultation on savings, transformation, or costings, and or the budget when you get clarity down the line?
So some elements of the savings we're putting forward require their own individual consultations as well. So the council tax relief scheme, I believe we're working towards going out to consult on that. We may not take these decisions. The situation may change, but we have to have given ourselves the flexibility to do so. And I think the timeline is really quite back to front. I'm not best pleased with it, but it's sort of outside of our control. I think the best we can really do is, once we've seen where the dust lies, if we do need to have further consultation or some further discussion with residents, because it hasn't gone in our favour or worked in line with what we've consulted on, we do have to speak to our residents. This is a really significant, hugely impactful thing wherever you are in the spectrum of the council, be it on receiving benefits or owning multiple properties. These are things which are going to have a material impact on you. So I don't know which bit we might have to speak about again, but certainly we shouldn't shy away from that bit.
Yeah, and if I can, thank you, Councillor, for the question. I think there is, so drawing attention to the table at 4.36, where our current remaining budget gap to be found, even if some of the potential decisions are enacted, is that 8.8 million that we've been looking at through the budget challenge sessions. And to Councillor Pascal's point, I definitely think that at the end of those budget challenge sessions, we need to be coming back to the committee and giving you some of the same detail we've given on the existing savings that we're already working to think about. I think to the question about consultation, we will go out for a budget consultation, as we always will. But I think to the point about what the longer term transformation needs to be for this council and the timing of it, we absolutely need to start talking to our residents, not just about how we might be able to balance the budget for 26-27, but if the government doesn't change its position on how much funding we will be losing over this period, we need to be talking to our residents about realistically what we can provide in that financial context and what they can expect from us and how they would like us to think about priorities in a much deeper way than I think we've ever done consultation on the budget before. So you're very right to raise.
Thank you. Pretty, I thought, and then go. Would you want to go first?
That's okay. Page 6, what I wanted to ask, and in the first point, which you do, how confident are you that these planned savings for 25-26 is achievable? And on the same point, there's the bullet point, the second from last, the £350,000 of procurement. How much have you achieved to date?
On the confidence, I think I'm broadly quite confident on the things we initially proposed. I'm a little bit less confident on the ones that we've been working on over the last few weeks, because we've sort of come up with the idea that we now need to do a little bit more homework. But I think the more general point is we're going to have to be making savings across all over the council, and we're going to have to be not just hoping, but we're going to have to be over budgeting, because as Lisa says, so much of the budget gap is actually in year 4. But even if our gap for this year is 8.8, next year 9 million, we need to be saving beyond that to make sure that when we get to year 4, we're not sitting here wondering how we're going to find 55 million, but actually we've already done some of the big work between now and then to bring it down to a more reasonable figure. So the confidence, I think we've got to aim quite big, and even if we don't quite deliver them, I'm viewing it as a 3-year saving program rather than just annual savings. If they slip a few months, of course, that will have an impact on the budget, but hopefully we're able to bring forward some other savings that might offset.
And alongside the quarterly tracking that we do with the budget monitor, we've introduced monthly tracking of all of our savings initiatives for 5-6. That happens in our savings transformation board. I think the figure, and we can clarify if I get it wrong, is 67% of our 5-6 savings are already delivered. And so whether they be through staffing that happened at the beginning of the year or anything else, the others are we're making progress on. As with every year, there are some that we're ranking red at the moment that we need to put more emphasis in. And we'll add, as Jem says, I think we're more confident than we have been in terms of the robustness in which we're making sure these things are delivered. On your particular question about the procurement efficiencies, which is a lag from 24-25, we have absolutely, the procurement team that we've got absolutely have made that level of savings and more in many different tendering exercises. There's a bit of a job for us to do to learn about when we make cross-council commitments about savings from procurement as an activity, and about making sure we're aligning it to a particular cost code and agreeing with services how much of their contribution will come to that saving. So it's learning for us just to make sure we're always exactly clear where the savings are going to come from.
Thank you.
And if I can just add to that just a tiny bit more, the report you're going to see at the next one of these meetings is the Q1 financial monitoring, and you've got a whole appendix in there that details all of the savings and the delivery at Q1. That's on leadership team as well.
So that'll be helpful.
I just have one or two other ones. On page 9, the enabling services, it said it was funding paused. Why is that?
Thanks, Councillor. I think partly it's to do with how we're taking forwards the rest of the work. So you'll see later in the paper we talk about the process work streams and the service reviews. In 24-25, under enabling services, again, learning, we probably bit off more than we could chew in one work stream. So we've delivered, as we said, 400,000 of that £500,000 target already. We're still looking at ways to deliver the rest of it. But we've basically broken down that enabling services into a more direct focus on workforce, processes, and service reviews more generally. So it's being taken forward just under a different banner.
Okay.
And it's also worth just adding that through the budget challenge sessions, we've been looking at some of that enabling resource, which sits in different parts of the organisation, and asking some of those questions about what kind of longer term transformation is possible in terms of bringing it into the centre or trying a different model, so that we're making the best use of that resource.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jem. And in the context of the so-called fair funding formula is anything but fair, and just because it's a public meeting, just to remind everybody that Goldwall Ward is the most deprived ward in London, and that this council is suffering, and people in North Kensington particularly depend on us. Despite that, I mean, we've obviously got to do the work that you're doing. Would you agree that nothing should be off the table that's non-statutory, and we really do need to approach this with a blank sheet of paper, and that would include, I hate to propose this, but the Notting Hill Carnival £1 million is something the government might notice if the £1 million from that was pulled. It might be a lever. Would you also perhaps give us an indicator of whether you think we might get some advance knowledge ahead of February on which way this is going? Because February is a very tight, as Will suggested in his question, a very tight timeline to make final decisions. Are we likely to know something before Christmas, as we historically do with budgets?
Yes, I believe it was end of, yeah, do you want to give it, I was thinking end of October, early November.
We were hoping, and we were told a little while ago that we would know earlier in previous years. So normally we get the draft settlement just before Christmas. But actually, with the changes in the government and things over the last few weeks, the budget is now not until the very end of November, 26th of November, I believe. And we've been told that the draft settlement will now be right up to close to Christmas again. So we're in exactly the same timetable as we were last year. Sadly, not earlier as we'd hoped.
Thank you, Lucy.
I was just going to say, I think Jen needs to answer.
Sorry, I went to the second bit, but
Caught up in data.
I don't want to be entirely doom and gloom. I think that this council has been well run for many years, and it has the capacity and the ability to weather this incredible storm. It is a shock of a storm. It's not one that they've given us enough time to plan for. But basing everything on just pure statutory is probably too far where we need to be. I think broadly the council needs to be very bold. I think, as Will said, we need to be bold about how we take these decisions and where we're willing to make bigger savings than perhaps we might have been comfortable a few years ago. Does that mean we have to start from the basis that we offer the absolute bare minimum? I don't think so. I think there is a sort of a mature discussion we have to have about where is it that we're willing to make savings. You referenced Notting Hill Carnival. I think Carnival personally is a fantastic thing to have in the borough. It means Notting Hill is a word people hear around the world. I know people have different views on it, but it would be a real shame that something like that is used as a complete bargaining chip over really what is about timing. We need to be able to budget for this. It may be that we're not able to contribute as much or for as many toilets as residents may like, but these are going to have to be small decisions within a sort of a bigger whole. But hopefully, with the change of ministerial and Secretary of State in government, they might want to reflect a little bit about what they're asking Central London to do. Their agenda, more probably.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you. I was just going to ask about the voluntary redundancy schemes and the savings that you are planning from that from 26, 27. And just to understand the level of uptake we would need for that to succeed, what the appetite has been so far, and what happens if the uptake is lower, which I can guess, and how we're safeguarding frontline services through this process.
So I'm very conscious of this. We're talking about people's livelihoods here, and I don't want to say anything I'm not allowed to at the moment. And we do have the head of the paid service here. So I don't know, Maxine, are we allowed to talk about how voluntary redundancy program has been going?
Yeah, I can. Do you want me to just say a couple of words about it? So we there was a report went to admin committee on the 11th last week. We have had 178, I think, applications. 181 were reported in the press. It's come down ever so slightly since then. And so I would say that it's going according to plan. We're just in the process at the moment of going through a series of kind of appraisals around business needs and looking at all of those applications fairly. And then at the end of all of that, we'll do a final review, and that will itself have some service implications. So there are discussions that we need to have with members as to what that yields. But it is looking like those kind of numbers. Obviously, they're not all general funded. They're not all exclusively for this borough. There's some by-borough services within there. But it is looking that we will be able to achieve the anticipated saving from those numbers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I have two questions. One of them is which service or services very badly affected by the savings? And second question is 1.6. There is a mention of 2.8 million additional use of parking income. Could you tell us a bit more what is this additional income?
So on your first point, I think it's fair to say that all services are going to be impacted. It would be impossible to shield certain areas of the council. I caveat that, of course, with the money we've already allocated for the Grenfell recovery, so that, of course, is separate. But on the general revenue cost of the council, this is going to have an impact absolutely everywhere. And obviously, some departments have more statutory services than others, so they're less likely to have as much flexibility. But I can't say one particular department will suffer more than any others. I think it's going to be a sort of a very difficult time for the next few years as we try and sort of work our way through this. That said, you highlighted that we do have some extra income from parking, so there is still ways that we can help balance the books. It's not all just from savings. We have to look at our income streams as well. You talked about commercialization as one such option. Parking and other fees and charges are part of the discussion that we're having. The 2.8 in particular it's currently we're projecting a sort of an underspend of generating more money from parking than we budgeted for, and we're allocating it against waste services, so areas in the general fund budget that we're able to use for parking revenue. That's what's been going on here. So effectively, by having more parking income, it's able to offset more of our general fund costs.
We always have 4 to 5 million underspend every year. Did you include that in your savings?
I'm not sure it's every year. I mean, we try and throughout the year with our MTFS papers, we make sure we're moving the budget to match the income as it's coming through. Last year, we did have an outturn that showed that we had 5.2 million of parking income. I think that's a positive. It means we have a positive outturn rather than negative. But what we've got to make sure is that we're not wholly reliant on single sources of income. We have to make sure that if it were to change and start moving in the other direction, that we have other alternative ways to generate income.
I'm conscious you missed a bit of the bottom, but please ask the question. If it's been asked before, I'll let you know.
Thank you very much. First of all, just to say that for human beings, toilets aren't a luxury. So in terms of the levers that we're looking to consider, I don't think numbers of toilets is something that might really reasonably should be on the priority, the first go-to list of how can we cut costs, but let's take toilets away from human beings. I don't think that's quite. You mentioned in relation to Notting Hill Carnival.
No, it's because Notting Hill Carnival has a budget for toilets, and this year we added extra money for the toilet budget.
Because they were no brainer. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, just it is. I'm not sure it is. So my main, I guess, question is I read this paper quite carefully, and I can see we're considering a lot of options and a lot of things have been scoped. I'm not seeing anything here, and I may have missed it, in which case do forgive me, not seeing anything here around bin collections. And you did say, I think, it's impossible to shield certain areas of parking rental from these considerations. So have we done any costing of perhaps going to a once weekly bin collection, which would actually be still a lot more than a lot of other councils? And we costed that.
Well, yes. So I don't think tonight's the place where we need to highlight potential savings. Yes, we do know what it costs us to run the waste service. In fact, today we were looking at the cost of our depot provision as well. Many boroughs have cut their waste collection services. I know many Labour councils now only collect it every 2 weeks.
And
we've always been We've always been very proud of our public realm because it's one of those universal services that we offer to everybody. But as I say, nothing is off the table. So it's one of those things that really we really not want to do, and I'm not anticipating we'd have to in 26, 27, but by 29, 30, looking at the budget gap that's ahead of us, unless other things change, everything has to be on the table. And I think that's what Councillor Pascal was highlighting, that everything has to be there.
Thank you. I have just one quick one, vis-a-vis the AI strategy. Is there any more detail on that, or is it just any AI?
It's certainly not any AI. The AI strategy last I saw was in draft form. I think it's fair to say that we need to move a lot faster on digital services, and AI has become a bit of a catch-all for sort of digital enabling. As Callum's highlighted, the enabling services are something that we're still require to make huge savings for the council. We've implemented a recent chatbot. We've just implemented Resident Connect, which helps people with their parking permits. There's going to be lots of individual changes through digitization. Some will be AI in the background. Some will be simply more efficient processes that we are able to do on a digital format. So rather than use AI as a sort of a generic term, I think it's digital it's probably better.
And some of it is obviously orientated and will be orientated about making savings and balancing the budget. But also the current systems many of our residents have to go through aren't exactly as modern or as efficient or as beneficial for them as they could be. So we'll always look to be able to stick to the mantra of becoming the best as much as we can, whilst also making savings. And digitalisation definitely feels, for those who are capable of making that transition, a good opportunity to do that.
Thank you. So when we say AI, we actually mean digital in general, because I think there is a difference. I think it's important that we are clear what we're talking about.
So the strategy is how we could implement AI within the council. It's not a wholly AI strategy. It's really how we bring AI into our digital plans.
Sure. Thank you. And then just finally, on page 10, where we're talking about the operational estate, and we're considering whether there are any specific assets that could be suitable for disposal. On page 11, it seems to say community hubs focusing on the north of the borough. Now, I'm guessing that's just because where they happen to be. But I would want to, I guess, sound a note of caution that the North Borough has already lost an awful lot in terms of assets. And I'm spending a lot of my time this week in particular talking to officers about the paucity of much needed space you're delivering, what needs to be delivered.
I mean, it's factual to say that there are more community hubs in the north of the borough than there are in the south, and that residents of the south also wish for there to be more available operational estate, as we call it, down there. The truth is, though, that the buildings come with a cost, and it's whether or not we can use our buildings more efficiently. Most services close up shop at 5, 6 o'clock. That means the buildings are vacant during the evenings. Could people use them for our evening activities? Could we look at using buildings on weekends that are otherwise closed? I think that's just pragmatic landlording and property management.
Or use them for yes.
And on the this is part of the operational estate work, and so this isn't talking about buildings that are utilised by the community or voluntary sector organisations. This is very much council-run facilities in the north of the borough, where part of the work that we've done under the customer access strategy has been to try and deliver more of our services out of this building and in where our residents need. And so we're trying to build on that approach, having hubs near where people live in operation, but making sure that we're then doing that in a way that also achieves best possible value.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask a question on 4.35, please? And just to understand this, it seemed to say the opposite of what the table said. The pension fund contribution is assumed at 75%, 7.5%, which would increase the budget, and it looks like it's decreasing the budget or decreasing the budget gap. Lisa, could you advise me? I think I've probably got my brackets the wrong way around or something.
No. So previous medium-term financial strategy assumptions assumed that the pension contribution would go back up to 15%. We're currently going through the triennial valuation at the moment, and early indications are that we will not need to have a 15% contribution rate for an employer, and it can remain at the previous 7.5%. So we are already expecting that we can make a 7.5% saving against our medium-term financial strategy.
That's the world's
assumptions.
unclearest paragraph, I think, because we do not either mention the 0% or the 15% in there. But I now understand what you're talking about. So we are at 0%. We're only going to go to 7.5%, not 15%. So that's a notional 7.5%. So
And I have to caveat that we're awaiting the outcome of the cloud evaluation. Yeah, that's our planning at the moment. We'll keep a close eye on it over the coming weeks and months as we develop the budget.
Thank you. I now understand. That's great. And I just wanted to make an overall observation, which is that, you know, we've moved from looking at business groups, particularly just on their own, to a more thematic and cross-cutting approach, which is things like personnel and property. And that I was doing that myself kind of 6 years ago, and called them pillars in those days. But nothing much has changed. And I think my overall criticism, and this challenge with perhaps what Will asked, is that it still doesn't feel like a strategy. It feels like a cross-cutting, which is better than a siloed cost-cutting exercise, but it doesn't really feel like a strategy yet. And that would be my challenge to this paper and to the future and the way we need to look at things. And as I say, you know, Will's idea of maybe kicking the ball around with other members in a workshop might assist in perhaps pushing us a little bit more towards that for the future.
And may have sounded like a little editing job beginning of 1.1 forward to the top, but I think it's a fundamental change that Mary has talked about there as well.
So I'm going to,
cultural change.
in addition to Will's recommendation, I'm going to add the recommendation that if everyone agrees that we recommend the leadership team takes a more strategic approach to this transformation and involves as many councillors as possible, involves all councillors in that approach. Good, thank you very much. I think that concludes our discussion of that paper. Thank you very much for coming. And it's, I have to say, it was a nice succinct paper.
Yes.
I just want to comment on that and
Yeah.
approvingly. Sorry, and I didn't ask if you had a question. I said thanks.
I think you can recommend the Callum takes a masterclass on the other directors.
Yes. Okay, now we're moving on to our first paper. Going back to the beginning, and we're going to look at and I'm just going to, I don't normally say anything at the beginning, just to say that I think we are all very grateful that we haven't seen a disaster on this thing. Not that I ever thought there was going to be a disaster, you've always inspired confidence. I've got lots of questions on this paper, but overall, I think we have all acknowledged, I think I'm speaking for the whole committee, that this was very well done and avoided all kinds of horrors that other councillors have reported, and probably principally among that was the very strong emphasis right from the beginning of adopt, not adapt, and I think you held the line on that all the way through, and I think officers are to be congratulated. That doesn't mean there won't be lots of very, very intense questioning, but thank you very much. Who would like to introduce this?
I'm just very briefly, I think you've summed it up really well there. It's, you know, over £15 million council project that went live, and apart from a small hiccup of HMRC's doing, has actually landed very well. It is really one of those enabling services that we need, that we talked about earlier, to be able to make sure that we are reporting on our finances better, that we are tracking payments, invoices, all the things that have now made Larry Ellison the richest man in the world. And so a few days ago, there's a reason that Oracle underpins so many government and business institutions. It works very well. So I think big testament to the officers that implemented it. We are still working our way through the sort of hypercare period to make sure that any problems are ironed out. But touch wood, so far it's going very well. I suppose the next big test will be around voluntary redundancy and how we sort of deal with pay slips and things accordingly. But my big hope for Oracle is that we can now use that as a bit of a springboard to have much more live data access to things such as income, costs, invoices, all sorts of things. Because this sort of quarterly monitoring is very good. Thank you also for the papers, but we should, in a modern organisation, be able to keep track of our budgets day to day and have access, sort of allocate people accordingly. That's sort of where I'd like to go with it. And yeah, I don't know if you have.
No, just to add, yeah, we did go live, which was a great achievement. all systems do have some teething problems, and you've seen in the paper we went through a period of hypercare. We're now just coming out of the stabilisation period when we will become what we're calling business as usual. We've done our first quarterly monitoring report. We are going to pause there. We've got some really good learning from that, and we are going to pause quarterly monitoring, have a look how it's worked, and do some implementation to improve it further. So this project, although the project is ending, it will still be a fundamental thing for the council, as Councillor Kamali says, and we will keep developing it over the coming months and years. Oracle roll out what they call an upgrade every quarter, and it can range from quite small to quite fundamental. They work with us to implement that, so we get an advance notice of what it can be. So we will always implement those as well to make sure we get the best out of our investment as we go forwards. So yes, that's where we're at, and I'm happy to take any questions in the report.
Lovely, thank you. Who'd like to go first on this one? Greg?
Thank you very much. Mary and I would endorse your introduction to the paper, having seen 40 years worth of Ministry of Defence projects and NHS ones and local government, to have one that delivers pretty much to time and to budget, minor slips here and there. Very impressive, well done. My only question was how are you getting on with the recruitment of the staff that you need to man the target operating model? Because I've got the impression that the main paper it was written a little time ago, and there might be an update.
Yes, so we're still working through the target operating model. We're actually interviewing tomorrow and Friday for some of the roles that sit in the digital space. All of the finance roles are now filled. The HR roles that we're going to fill at this point in time are all filled as well. So we are moving away from our reliance on a third-party provider for our level 2 support into having our own staff. So hopefully tomorrow and the next day will be successful. We are still also reviewing where the target operating model quite lands, because we've been running the system for about 6 months now, and we've learned some really good lessons there. But to answer the question on recruitment, we're really getting there now, which is good. And we've had some really good levels of engagement and interest in the roles as well.
Very much. Well
I have 3 very small, short questions. First, the migration to the Redwood. Did that incur any extra costs? And I apologise if I couldn't see the figure. Will it have any impact in delivery of the project? My second question is, the predicted cost of delivery is only 1% higher, exceeds by 1%, which is commendable. But is that realistic? What is the buffer there? And my final question is this HCC exit on the data. Why is it taking so long? And you're not being able to resolve it. What's the holdup? Thank you.
Yeah. So Redwood is an element of the system that Oracle have introduced, and whilst it didn't cost us any more to have Redwood, we did have to sort of stop a little bit on what we were doing, pause, make sure that we were including it in our implementation project. So it probably slowed us down a tiny bit. We did still hit the go live date, but it is a beneficial piece of kit that Oracle have rolled out to the system, so it was worth us doing that. With regard to the overspend, slight variance, 156,000 against £15 million spend, and that's at this point in time. We're hoping we can recover that as we finish the year. We've got a couple of posts that haven't been filled for the whole year, so that'll reduce the savings as well. But even if we don't, I would say that's a very good overspend against such a big project. And then Hampshire, the exit from Hampshire and data. So Kensington and Chelsea are the first council to off-board from Hampshire. You'll have seen in the report that hasn't been easy. And our plan initially was that we would off-board and we would take all of our data back. I'm not a real techie person, but in the simple world, we would take all our data back from Hampshire and we would store it somewhere within our IT systems and the cloud, etc. actually, through conversations with Hampshire, we're now moving towards a model where they retain the data for us and we will have access to that. And there's two reasons for that. One being the time it would take to get the data from them in this way that we would need it. And two, the cost for us to retain it ourselves rather than them retain it on our behalf is much greater. So we are still working through those legal arrangements with Hampshire for them to retain our data. We do have an arrangement in place now for year one, which we were always going to have anyway, which would be they hold the data and we get access via them to it. It's that longer term period where we're now thinking they will hold the data for us. We'll still have access. It's not that our data's lost or anything.
It's quite a rigorous process that having access to the data.
Sorry, say that again.
It's quite a cumbersome process, isn't it?
To get
get
the
access.
data from them to
Yeah,
us,
yeah,
yes. And actually that's really time consuming. And
Yes, exactly.
hence why we're going to leave it with them, but with legal arrangements in place. And we've spent a lot of time in conversations with to get to that point.
So what is, sorry, Chair. So what is the cost differential from us retaining it to them retaining it? Have you costed that?
We do know those costs, but I think I probably
Okay.
shouldn't
Oh,
say
yeah,
that
okay,
because
okay.
Hampshire
Sure,
are
sure,
in,
yeah, sorry, yeah.
contract with other councils as well.
Okay, thank you.
Lucy.
I was just going to ask a question on tri-borough and bi-borough working. As you note, that staff are still using IBC and Oracle, which I'm sure creates sort of inefficiencies and a fragmented organisational picture. Just wanted to understand what steps were being taken to resolve the dual system changes so that it was a bit more reliable and operating on a singular basis.
So throughout the project, when we were working on it, we engaged heavily with both Westminster and Hammersmith and Fulham colleagues for services that are in tri-borough. We have no option but for some of those staff to have to use both systems because Westminster and Hammersmith and Fulham haven't come off of the SAP IBC platform. But we've made sure that all of the people who are in those two boroughs and need access to Oracle have an Oracle license as well. But they will always, unfortunately, because we're using two different systems, have to do things in two different ways. So if they want to raise a purchase order for Kensington, they go in and they do it on the Oracle system. And if they want to raise a purchase order for one of the other two boroughs, they have to go in and use the IBC SAP system. There's no way around that. But we have worked with them really well to try and get them on board throughout the project and make sure they feel integrated. And there are a few teething problems, or there were a few teething problems, but I think overall it's working well.
Okay, thank you. Can I just go back to the data? So of that data, what is personal data and do you have the consent now that Hampshire is no longer working for us, that actually our employees are happy for their data to be held by Hampshire? And secondly, what period of time are you talking about you still needing access to that data? Because Hampshire's own systems will change and we'll lose compatibility of us looking at over time. So I'm interested to know, are we talking about a year, couple of years, or are we talking about in perpetuity?
The second, which is the perpetuity. So we don't physically access the data ourselves. The arrangement is we ask Hampshire to give us, we ask the questions, they give us the data back. And they will be required when they change their system. So they're moving from the SAP system they've got to SAP HANA, which is a different version, a non-cloud version. They will have to move our data or store our data so that we've still got the access we need to our data. With regard to personal data, so Darren Mann, our Chief Digital Officer, has been heavily involved, as is David Hughes, in the conversations with Hampshire around how they retain our data, what's known as personal data, what's council generic data, how it's stored. And again, as I said earlier, legal have been involved in those conversations as well. So we're making sure we're compliant throughout with Hampshire, but they will be required to retain that data. And particularly at the moment, because of the ongoing Metropolitan Police inquiries into Grenfell, we have to retain our data forever at the moment. And Hampshire are fully aware of that, and that will be written into the contract with them. So I think we've got all bases covered on data.
I'm just thinking from the employee perspective. Those data should be cleansed after a period of time, particularly once staff members leave. And I'm just conscious that you may find that this is somewhere you actually need a data protection expert to actually come in and talk about who's handling the data, who's the controller.
Yeah.
So I just think you are having a very complex system here, given that there's no longer going to be a contractual relationship with them.
And I can just add to that, so I can't remember the lady's surname, Fatima, who is our.
I know.
Yeah, I'm looking so I can remember her name. My apologies. She's been heavily involved in all of these conversations as well.
Could I just ask about lessons learned? So on page 41 in 441, we talk about, in fact, particularly the first two bullet points, which is the strategic alignment and active participation in the process would have expedited the design, and the original plan was very ambitious and there wasn't sufficient time for preparation and decision making. Anybody on a big project could have flagged those, and I'm disappointed that we didn't learn those lessons, particularly given the mess that we made years ago when we first did Triborough HR, payroll and finance. And I look at these and I go, given the previous paper, which was meant to be the subsequent paper on transformation, actually, where do we take these lessons and really learn that actually time spent at the beginning deciding that you need a mini, not a Rolls Royce, actually is so much, that upfront time is so critical in making the right decisions and the right choices and giving it enough time. And time again, projects go wrong on that basis. So I commend you on the fact you pulled back and delivered this almost to budget and certainly to time, but those lessons are critical for all the future work.
Absolutely agree, and I think we don't always do reports like this either, so we can use this report for our learning moving forward. The original plan was ambitious. We knew that at the start. We were partly driven by Hampshire and when they needed us to offboard. So I think we got over here Christmas time last year talking about changes, and before that in March 2024, a paper went to leadership team. So we definitely know that was ambitious. We knew that was ambitious from the start. The lessons, strategic alignment, I think that was just, we could have got a little bit closer together. I think that's all I can say really about that one. But yeah, that's where we're at. But we've definitely learned some really valuable lessons in the project.
For the mini Rolls Royce analogy, I think that given we've talked so much about digitalization today, I think that's absolutely correct. We need to make sure that we're not trying to include absolutely every service in a product before we launch it to our residents. If we're going to be able to modernize and get people accessing the council online, whilst being mindful of sort of digital exclusion, we need to launch something and then have it be able to be expanded rather than trying to perfect it before it comes out. And in fact, that's sort of what we've done with the parking permit recently. It went live, and now we've within a month added subscription payments, and hopefully we'll then add on even more going forwards. But yeah, that's going to have to be our approach.
Thank you. Again, still with lessons learned, in addition to the success of the project overall, this section here, I think, is really a gold standard piece. We hear a lot across the council about learning lessons, and we don't always see the lessons actually being learned. But what we have here is itemised and listed. And so the question or point I'd like to sort of put is, and it ties in with the previous paper and as well, where we're talking about transformation. How can we, and I think this is maybe more for the lead member because it's more cross-cutting, how can we ensure that these lessons learned here get embedded in the other work of the council, particularly where we're looking at transformation and savings?
Yes, good point. I think some things which are task and finish, which are sort of more such as this one, where you sort of have a program, you deliver it, and then you move on. It's easier to have lessons learned be a defined set of things. I think where we're doing transformation, there's going to be it's got to be a bit of an ethos that has to underpin it all. We want to have an ambition and a goal of where we're trying to get to, but accepting that you can't transform an entire service or area of the council and sort of preempt everything that you might learn along the way. It's prudent for us to think that we can take some of the learnings from such a project as this. But I think generally when we're looking at the services that we're offering, the sort of the day-to-day services, we've got to be a bit more willing to accept that some things are not always going to be perfect as we go through, but that our ability to listen and hear when things might go wrong mean that we react rather than simply saying, well, we're just motoring along. So slightly different. I think there's sort of start and finish projects. You can easily assess whether or not they've been successful. Things which will take many years and have myriad numbers of people involved, you want to make sure that you're sticking towards your ethos and you're actually responding when people highlight things might not be going the way they expected, or if there's other problems as they come along, that you react and adapt.
I think you probably would agree with me that prevention is better than cure. And just to take that one example, the sufficient time for preparation and decision making, that's something that could go across the council to any piece of transformation and increase efficiency if we learn from that. So that's the kind of example that I'm meaning, not things that are specific to this project, but making sure that where there's learning here that speaks to some of the transformation work that we're going to be looking at, that we saw in the previous paper, in terms of the importance of making sure that we have maximal efficiency and minimal waste. Yes, it's good to respond to things when they go wrong, and I know we don't always do that. But on top of that, it's even better if we can preempt the things that we already know fine well because we've got them in a report. That's all.
Yeah, being able to preempt problems is great, but there's also going to inevitably sort of known unknowns.
Oh, of course. It goes without saying. I'm just saying to make sure that we learn the lessons that are before us. That's all. That's it.
Yeah. Well,
I move on to Mo.
Yeah.
Black and white.
Thank you. 2 points. Most of this program, especially this program, is mainly based on AI. So the question is, there must be ways in the clause that confidential information should not be available, because you could gather anything through AI. Do we have these measurements in place?
Yes, certainly. But I think the AI element, you're thinking more about the AI strategy, or
Yes.
with AI embedded within Oracle?
Yes.
AI within Oracle.
Yeah, it is. It's based on AI.
Right. I mean, yes, there is artificial,
Yes.
but it's very different from sort of an AI chatbot that you interact with as a resident. So these large digital systems, there's been AI in them for many years, longer than we've been talking about AI in sort of the consumer world. They've been making computer-based decisions probably for decades at this point. What's the exact question?
Confidential information.
Confidentiality, yes, I'm sure we have.
Yeah, I can answer that. So, staff members and elected members will have an access, and you will have an access based on your role. So we call it a role profile. So that will depend on a number of different things. So if you are a manager of people, you can see some of their data. So like annual leave, sickness, things like that. If you are an officer, there's 6 different approval levels, and that's all written into the financial regulations and the constitution, and we took paper back at the start of this calendar year to administration committee about changing slightly those levels. So depending on which level will be what access you have, what level of authorization to purchase or to raise purchase orders and then approve things. So you can't, it's not just an open system. I can't go in and look at everybody's data, and likewise other people can't. It is restricted on different tiers throughout the system. We've got lots of checks and balances in place. And we know when, the IT team will know if someone's trying to log in and they can't get the access, they might ask for access, and you'll only be given it if you meet that criteria. But it's all done on a role-based approach.
Okay. My second point, if I may, we are talking about the cuts and savings, and the amount of money spent on this is huge. And we know the coming years, the savings and cuts will become even greater. I think it's time to think out of the box and be a bit creative. We have Imperial College, and we have lots of local talents it might be a good idea exploring the ways of designing the programs in partnership with Imperial College. They have the top students in the world in that Imperial. We will say that, I'm sure, because I've been talking to friends about this program. Most of these programs are created in India and cheap places. They pay 100,000 to create one program. It's a huge amount for them, but it's costing us probably 10 million. So we could, if in partnership with students, and most of the people who are creating these programs are students, or this is the stage. So it's a good idea to explore the idea of start designing programs locally. We have local talents, and we'll be saving hugely here.
We absolutely have local talents, but there are also international talents out there. So I'm all for working with in the area to make sure that we are.
Imperial is international.
Imperial is very international,
Yeah.
but when it comes to sort of digital products, they have to be suitable for a council and they have to meet all the checks and balances as Lisa sets out. But I've got no qualms with looking at the sort of incubators, the innovators that do exist in some of London's fantastic universities. I'm sure Imperial have lots of interesting work going on behind the scenes. I think given where we are, as you say, big changes are necessary. Let's see what's available. Look forward to it. I've worked with them on air quality tests in the past. They've got great technology and research going on.
Thank you. Emma, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up actually on Joanna and Claire's comments on the lessons learned, because I was right in the thick of it when we had that disaster all those years ago with the project contract. I don't even know if I dare say the words. I don't know if it's all been dealt with legally now, but I was right in the thick of it, and a lot of the things that have come up about the alignment and the work needed to be done in advance of going into that particular contract. We were warning about. I was chair of Capital Corporate Services, and we were warning about that right then. Jackie remembers at the time in the meeting, cross-party, and it wasn't listened to. And I mean, obviously, this has been done so much better, miles better. But I won't forget all the outcomes of that. It was absolutely horrific. People were losing their livelihoods, and then the procurement report that sort of digested what had happened and found some of the money, worked out how much we'd actually lost over that project. So I'm glad this has been done a million times better. There are still some things that we should have picked up on. So my question really is, when there are recommendations of this kind made and these lessons learned, obviously the officers change and the councils change. Where is that legacy of knowledge? Where is it kept? Because it's a shame that we some of those lessons maybe hadn't been kept to, and it was an awful time, and there were people behind that who were not around anymore.
And I think this echoes Claire's question about how those lessons are not just applied to computer procurement in future, but to all sorts of projects and management.
So where's that legacy of knowledge? That's what I want to know, because people
corporate knowledge, which is a precious thing, which is often lost unwittingly.
Yeah. That's exactly.
Please,
thank you.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
oh no, Maxie,
wish. Because this probably goes beyond Lisa. So I suppose it's a really important point, and that there are various answers to the questions, but the main thing that I would say is that lessons learned should never be captured and only be in one place. So it should never. So of course, the Oracle Project Board has considered this. It will also come to management team, my management team, and then we have something called once a month the Risk and Control Board, which specifically looks at the risks, and there's a lot there on there about both project control and also digital risk around digital systems, and that also that risk reporting goes to audit and transparency, but and from savings and transformation. We have lessons learned sessions periodically about how that program has gone. But fundamentally, you have to create structure and time around the opportunity to be able to sort of discuss these things and take responsibility for the things that have changed. I mean, I think this is a really good summary, an extensive summary of all of the different lessons. I'm aware of all of these, and there was a mitigation in place for all of them as well. So, for example, the time taken, because of that move from SAP to SAP HANA, we had set ourselves that target of the October to make change. But actually the decision to extend was in fact taken in an orderly fashion before that deadline came along, a couple of months before, on the basis of the progress of the work with Hampshire. So I use that as an example just to sort of say that even within the project, I think lessons were being learned iteratively as they went. And then all of these, I think, will, form the basis. This is our biggest IT project, one of our, as Councillor Baxter pointed out, one of our most expensive projects, revenue projects. And so those structures, and this committee is also an important part of that. So everybody, elected members, with longer organisational memory than Lisa or I, able to kind of say, well, this happened before and we need to learn this. So I know that there's various sense because there isn't a single place. It has to be a kind of lesson learning culture throughout the organisation, assisted by structures and time to consider.
Thank you. Can I just suggest that there is actually a central place. There is a consultation toolkit, and certainly this should be in procurement toolkits, and query whether there should be a lessons learned or transformation, that actually all those aren't seen as silos, but they're all interrelated. Sorry.
Thank you. I was going to, when I first saw this paper, I asked Lisa, the one change I think I asked Lisa for perhaps was a bit more on what new card capabilities this has given us and how we harness them. I think because it's early stages, this paper is still a bit light on that. And I think this committee would, with everybody's agreement, like to see a report in about 12 months' time about what those new capabilities are and how we're using them and taking advantage of them. Because, as I mentioned, this is a very expensive project. We've done it for all the right reasons, which is to get some of that data coming through, real-time data that we can manipulate. It's all very well having the data if we don't actually organise ourselves to use it. And so I think if we could have that report in 12 months' time, I think that would be, and it again echoes with the transformation and supports that process. So if everyone else has agreed, we should agree to make that recommendation.
Did you want to make the recommendation on the single repository?
Yes, so we'll, yes, the lessons learned to kind of come up with some way of making a single repository. I don't know what that would look like and how we'd remind people to go and look at it. This is always the thing, but that's what Maxine is here for. It's a great model.
I think the way that Joan mentions it in terms of being part of a toolkit, part of an operational manual for the council.
Yeah,
that would be central, and it would be amended as we get new experience. It would be a place of keeping corporate experience going.
We can crack that. You'll be probably the first one to see. Thank you very much for that. And that brings that paper, our discussions on that paper to an end. So we're now looking at agenda item 6. We're looking at the forward plan and key decisions. Did I decide that I was going to try and do this quickly and ask everybody if they've got any one they want to pick up rather than pulling through the pages because they are many. Lola, are there any ones you want to pick out? No?
Sorry.
I just asked you, were there any of these that you wanted to pick out? No. Fair?
I don't think so.
Lucy? Do you think so? That's the double check. Double check. Greg?
I was going to mention on page 3, Pianist Streets, Public Realm and Harvestness. We did actually have a paper on that on Monday night, which covered that, but unfortunately the options, the 6 options, which I know Councillor Canali in his previous role spent a lot of time championing within the department, they were pulled from the paper, so we never actually saw what they were. I did see them in the draft. And I'm very excited to find out what they are officially, but so we kind of did it, but we didn't fully scrutinise it because we didn't have that the options. But I don't know where we go from there because we.
Then is it going to leadership teams to them 15th of October without us being able to scrutinise it properly?
Well, exactly. Yes, it is. So we scrutinise waste in general terms because it's the annual opportunity to talk about waste and street cleaning and the things that go with that. But unfortunately, we weren't able to add that into the options because they were in the paper.
So given the time frame, what are the options on this one, Jackie?
well, you won't have another committee meeting before the 15th of October, but we could arrange for the paper to be circulated. I could ask James to work with you.
I think it would be nice to see the leadership team paper, please.
Yes,
I
yeah,
think
when it's
that's-
published, that'll be around about the 7th. Yeah, I'll speak to James.
Thank you.
Joanna? Will?
No.
Me? No. You have now having had a look. Yeah, go on then. Sorry.
I don't know, on page 4, on the sideways numbers, the housing management performance Q1 and Q2. I think that's going to be circulated to us anyway at my committee.
I would hope it would.
Yeah, because you have your own committee.
Exactly, it's the one this judgment and what have you.
Yeah.
The one that I think this committee might be interested in is the Portobello Streetscapes being phase 1. I'm aware that there's
If you have big breaks,
there might be some.
I did touch on streetscapes
You
on
did.
Monday night.
The Portobello scheme in particular.
Talk about the hostile.
No, they didn't talk about that.
Yeah,
But-
because that's an issue of concern quite broadly among residents and market valuers, as far as I'm aware.
The streetscapes generally.
Yeah, this is a scheme.
Specific
Yeah,
one,
it's a
no,
specific
different.
But I'm sure you'll look at that.
So going out to consultation, you're not to.
And then the supported housing strategy. Feeds into my committee vis-a-vis our working group that we had. That's it.
Which page is that?
6.
Are you suggesting that should be circulated, or that if you're going to come see it anyway, or?
I just like to make sure that we do have that included. That's all.
Yeah, perfect. Yep, good. Sounds like it is. So I think we've looked at the forward plan of people. So now we've got the work program report.
No, just to agree,
We agree.
membership of the budget working group, and Lucy was going to come back with somebody from adult social care and health, but all of the members are continuing.
Okay, lovely. Great. I think that, unless there's any urgent business, I think that concludes our meeting. I don't think we pass anybody else. One would try.
We did get last time.
Two years.